When we have talked so far about HDRI, we had always in mind to capture the situation from a scene, a location, or from a set. And of course, the target was always to capture pretty much a round view of that whole set, from pole to pole and one time around. We have done it so far with fish eyes and with chrome spheres. And of course, we could do this with pretty much any other lens, as long as we rotate the lens around its nodal point and stitch everything together. What is finally the biggest problem of it? And I don't have in mind that global illumination do not produce the light spots that we have seen on the little Buddha figure in the last episode. If you have looked carefully, I hinted shortly to it. But this is not the theme here. We could fix this with some light sources, of course. The major theme is, of course, any panorama shot one time around has a big limitation. It is only true for one moment in time, for one single location, and in the moment the main actor goes out of the scene, the light situation will maybe not fit. Or, as I will show you soon here, when something changes in the scene, in the real scene, it might not affect the one HDRI because it was shot at one point in time. So this is, from my point of view, the biggest limitation of HDRI until now. That is why I stay here in Red Cine X Pro, and the truth is, this free application unwheels or unlocks the power that we can have now from a Red Epic or Scarlet. And I went out into the garden, of course, here for some test shots for this episode with my Red Scarlet, and I shot in HDRX. So what is HDRX? First of all, Red is a mixture out of still and film camera, and it tries to mimic film, and film had way more dynamic range than most digital cameras have today. So what I wanted to have here was, of course, all this movement here. And of course, I try to make it here really hard for the camera to capture everything. So, and then I take here also a little pocket green screen and move this here around. And as you can imagine, this will change dramatically the light. As you can see here on the gray card already, this is not without influence. So now we turn this back and we look to this picture. It looks now pretty simple, right? Compared to all this movement that we had here. And I placed, of course, the chrome sphere exactly so that the twigs in the wind changes the light situation pretty much permanently. That is maybe not the best idea when you want to have something evenly lit, but if the main actor sits exactly there, then it should be exactly in that way. And maybe the chrome sphere is pretty small, and you can place this somewhere where a roto artist can put this later out of the picture. So you film with one camera the light and with another camera just the situation. And then you can fit in easily everything. Another way would be, of course, to move this sphere around, maybe the path that the actor has to do, the 3D actor. And then you go with the camera with this chrome sphere, you track the whole sphere to stabilize it, and then you make just a panorama out of it. And then you have really the light that the actor should have when he comes to the tree. Maybe he stops at a red car or a green whatever. You get my point. So how is it working here? The camera itself has roughly 13.5 stops for one exposure. And there are two methods to do this. You expose this 13.5 stops exactly as normal footage. So in case you don't want to have HDRX, you can use only this track. And the frame here that we have here in look HDR mode, this is the A-frame. That is normally what we try to capture all the time. And then we have here also an X-frame, and that is something that goes between 2 and 6 stops above what we have. So 18 or 18.5 stops, or whatever you think is maybe the best here, can be mixed. So now we have here exactly only the highlights. And the beauty of that is that it is recorded exactly at the same time. So no sequences of images, painfully long sometimes, up to a minute when you need to go into large sequences where one shot has maybe 15 seconds finally. And so everything changes, you have ghosting and all of that. And here you take it just at the same time. It is pretty simple. The A-frame is shot for normal time when we talk about movies or whatever, 48ths of a second. And during that time, the A-frame is exactly exposed as well. Same frame, same lens, same time, exactly in the middle, and then composed maybe by a simple blend or with magic motion, where we don't need to know what's behind the scene, but it merges this wonderfully. And so we get here an over 18 stop exposure. And we could move the sphere, we could move the camera, we could do many things with it. Or mount it on a car, and when we drive behind something, we film the whole scene. And as you remember, we get here nearly a one-time around view. Only a circle behind it is not really exposed. So this would be here the first step that we need to understand, that we can create now HDR-V, so to say, or HDR-X as Red names it. Works pretty simple. And then we need this, of course, into Cinema 4D. Cinema 4D is by default not able to read RAW formats, not from your DSLR, nor from Red at all. So we have to export this, which I have done here. So do we need the whole thing? We could. But we can go also here to framing and say, please, frame this. And then I get here exactly what I need. I have shot this here in 3K to get not too much of data into my system. But if you had a Red Epic, for example, you could go even higher, and 5K in HDRI, everything is possible then. I used here a lens, 70-200 L lens, and I put an extender in just in case. But even with 7 meters nearly distance, or 20 feet in distance, based on what I divide or count here, I needed only 205 millimeter to get this here into frame. And I can't see myself here with the camera anymore. This small one is the camera with tripod and everything else. I have stops over 6, and I can merge this here pretty simple. And again, I do not touch anything because I want to have really the nice and pure frame here. And I don't need to do anything. The file itself that I get from this footage here is of course a red log, and we can check here everything off so we can see what we have here, if that is of interest on you. Red color 3 and red gamma 3. That means it's a log file. And you remember when we talked about log, the 10 to the power of -1 to the power of 1 and so on, 10 to the power of 3, and then we can map. Pretty similar to that is exactly the curve, how it is recorded. So we don't lose a lot of stuff, and when it is mixed, we get even something better. Red Cine X finally puts this then exactly in linear light, and when we export this here to OpenEXR, which is integrated by default, then we get a file that we can use immediately. We can take this, for example, to Nuke, unwrap it and then bring it into Cinema 4D, or what I will show later in the panorama series, that we can also use this probe format directly into Cinema, because I like this more than to transform it or convert it and then use it, and from there it gets read out, and any transformation changes these pixel values, and that is not what I like to have. So a direct projection would work here as shrink projection, and I'll show you how to do this later in the panorama series. And for now I want to go only with one frame here into Photoshop. I want to show you here the fast rundown, of course, and I haven't used here the crop version because sometimes you want to have maybe the full frame. It's OpenEXR, it has all the potential that you want to have, and you can even measure that in photomatics if you like to have. We come close to, for the main part, except for the sun, to a contrast ratio of 1 to 6000, which is huge. And of course you could adjust this as well. My idea is, of course, when you take a look to all these lower lights, you could even start the light at the 50% or 80% reflectance card, and then whatever is the 50% would be then black, and you can replace this maybe with an average that you just fill in. In that way you create many stops above the 18 stops that we normally have, because you don't need to bother with the low light. This is dependent then on, of course, the project and the set and all of that. You have to decide this finally, which light is the most important and how to capture this in the best way, because we always want to have the most differentiation possible. Okay, so I have opened it, I have cropped it as I would have done in Red Cine X Pro, and then I changed the image size, because when I use Flexify 2, it takes this format then finally to write the result into it, and the result looks then in this way. And before I write this maybe in a square and then change it, I like to have it written from Flexify directly into this and keep in some areas at least the best quality. Here we have nearly no quality, but this is the back side pretty much of the sphere, and in the middle of this picture here, of this frame, we have the front side of the sphere where the camera normally looked to it. And again, I want to show that here. This is the tripod where I was, and I sit at the moment behind it. Pretty small. And this is sufficient to have a nice illumination for the scene. It's not the most precise one, because the format was already 1600 pixels only, and I would go with that. It has a lot of potential in it, and you can see here we can go here really down, and the sun is really there, and we go then up, and after a while everything goes away. So this is not a small area here. And then of course I can change the exposure, which is pretty much done just by adjustment. Go to exposure, go to roughly the middle point here of not that option reset brings me back. This little eyedropper is the one, and when you click on it you get here a different value. So wherever you click you get a different one. And let's check out what I had set here. This looks pretty close to 0.18 here. Of course we have a variance in it. It got light from the sphere and so on. And normally I wouldn't leave this in. It was more for the purpose of demonstration. Okay, this is already everything in Photoshop. I would save this now again as OpenEXR. And then let's hop to Cinema 4D. So a fresh new scene, and if I would import now the whole image sequence, I don't do this here because we couldn't see any rendering from that in real time here, then I would change here of course everything to the frame rate that I had initially suggested for the whole project and which I've used in the camera. Anyway, we need first the material here, and I do this now here in step by step. I don't need anything of these, I need only the luminance channel. And inside of the luminance channel, I go to texture and load the image. And this is here already the one HDRX. This is the file. This is normal. This is just how it looks when you have linear light and no gamma into it. That's okay. I don't want to put this to any location. And you see here Cinema has already an idea how it has to look, because I have set everything up in the project settings to linear light. And we have to take a look here, of course, project settings and linear workflow. That's pretty much all you have to do. And then we go here to our sky object. I drag this just on top of it. This is pretty much all we have to do with that one. And then I take here just a sphere. Maybe I make that a little bit bigger. And I create here a material that I put just on it. What we don't need to have here for this material, and this is maybe a longer discussion, is the specular. Specular is a simulation. It's nothing really real, which I have pointed out in another series. And normally we should use reflection for that. We can take here a tiny little bit reflection in it. So we put this maybe down, or we use here something that is pretty nice. When we go here to physical, this gives us here the most precise one. And I stay here with water, of course. That's maybe not exactly, maybe copper or plastic, whatever. So we go then to effect and to global illumination. And we don't have a sky dome here anymore, so I leave everything as it is, just default, just for the purpose of demonstration. And I go here to render to picture viewer. And you have seen here my little game with it that I had before. And so we get here already something that looks nice. Of course, we haven't oriented the whole scene here. That means we have to take a look. We can rotate this here a little bit, move it to the side. And maybe I take for a moment the reflection out to make really clear where we are. That's too small. And then we render again. And this would be here the light that we get at the moment from the whole thing. This looks here rather ugly. So I take here to the sky a tag, Cinema 4D tag, compositing tag, and scene by camera switch to off. What I want to do here now is to render this one more time. Okay. And then I take this here away for a moment. I click here on our light source, go to luminance, and just pull this to the left side. So we have no information on the picture, just 100% white from here. And I render this again. And then I can compare how much influence the whole thing had. So I go here to A, I go here to B, and then I can see here already this would be just white, and this is the light that we have produced. Because without the comparison, we don't see anything. Or not that much. I don't know how much the compression eats here. Okay, and now imagine that you have all these images for the global illumination, and it changes when I come around with the green stuff. It illuminates here a little bit green and so on. And here we can see in a very short time, I search where the green one was. I found it. I open it, and I have here some bars from my text here. That's certainly not what I intended to have here. And just for the sake of precision, I go here to 200, go to Flexify, choose exactly this option that I need, save this here out as green, and then I go to Cinema 4D, load it in, and I render this, and then I can see here the difference. And it was a little bit too dark, so I had to check with the gray card, is that really? Yes, it was perfect. And when I go here to the difference, then I can see that we have some kind of lilac in it. And this lilac is of course then the opposite of green when I go into difference. that's the opposite of it. And then we can see how much this little bit of green did, and having me exactly in the sun, so it gets a little bit darker, and that was the whole result. I think that sums it up for HDRV or HDRX. This is an exciting step into a future of more and more vivid live light inside of Cinema 4D. I look forward to it, to work more with this option, and of course it's pretty simple, just a button press and just render it out. Perfect. Thanks for listening. See you in the next episode.